America woke up to a spectacle that would have been unthinkable in any previous generation, a sitting president publicly demanding the arrest of his predecessor. Donald Trump is no longer hinting, teasing, or dog whistling. He is shouting treason, amplifying conspiracy chains, and circulating arrest fantasies as political content. This is not accountability. It is theater, designed to replace evidence with outrage and law with loyalty. As immigration raids ignite protests, investigations close in, and governing paralysis deepens, Trump reaches for the oldest distraction in authoritarian politics: invent an enemy, accuse them of betrayal, and dare the country to look away. Donald Trump has turned accusation into assembly, line production, stamping out charges at the speed of a social media refresh. In his latest escalation, the word treason is no longer a grave constitutional allegation reserved for war and espionage. It is a trending label, deployed like a meme and amplified until it feels familiar. The target is Barack Obama, recast overnight as the mastermind of a shadowy plot involving intelligence agencies, fabricated reports, and a stolen presidency. The method is simple and brutally effective. Repeat the charge, widen the cast of villains, flood the feed, and let outrage substitute for proof. In this factory, evidence is optional, velocity is everything, and volume becomes validation. The spark is a selectively framed intelligence report released into a political wildfire. Trump presents it not as an assessment with limits, caveats, and competing interpretations, but as a smoking gun that magically resolves a decade of controversy. Context disappears. Process vanishes. The distinction between intelligence analysis and criminal culpability collapses. Former officials like James Comey and John Brennan are dragged into the narrative as supporting characters, not through indictments or findings, but through implication by proximity. The result is not an argument. It is an atmosphere. Once the air is thick with suspicion, the accusation feels self-sustaining. What makes this moment different is not merely the charge, but the choreography. Trump does not argue in courtrooms or committees. He performs in feeds and clips, where the rules reward extremity. A president sharing arrest fantasies, magnified by artificial imagery, is not a slip of the tongue. It is a deliberate recalibration of what power looks like. The spectacle trains audiences to imagine punishment before process, cages before charges, verdicts before trials. Humor becomes dark because the joke lands on the rule of law itself. The timing sharpens the blade. Immigration raids trigger protests. Fatal encounters provoke national grief. A looming government shutdown threatens daily life. Investigations inch forward. In moments like these, diversion is not accidental, it is strategic. Accuse loudly. Accuse absolutely. Accuse someone large enough to eclipse the crisis. When the word treason echoes, it drowns out policy failures, administrative chaos, and inconvenient questions. The past becomes a punching bag so the present can slip away. There is also a linguistic trick at work. Treason is a moral sledgehammer, not a legal scalpel. It demands allegiance rather than analysis. Once invoked, disagreement becomes complicity, skepticism becomes betrayal, and silence becomes guilt. This is how a hashtag colonizes a concept. The charge spreads because it is easy to share and hard to disprove in a scrolling culture. By the time facts arrive, the mood has already settled. History offers a stark contrast. Previous presidents faced scandal with restraint or resignation, inquiry with testimony, defeat with concession. Here, accountability is inverted. Investigations are framed as attacks. Institutions are cast as enemies. The presidency becomes a megaphone for grievance rather than a steward of norms. The accusation factory hums because it feeds on distrust, and distrust feeds on repetition. The danger is not that the claims will prevail in court. The danger is that they will prevail in consciousness. When treason becomes content, democracy becomes a stage prop, and justice is reduced to applause. That is how a hashtag starts to feel like a sentence, and how noise begins to masquerade as truth. There is a moment when rhetoric stops being noise and becomes rehearsal. That moment arrived when an artificial intelligence-generated video depicting Barack Obama being arrested inside the Oval Office was boosted by the President of the United States. The image was not subtle. Handcuffs, orange prison uniform, federal agents performing a scene that has never happened, and has never been authorized by any court. This was not satire produced on the fringes of the internet. This was presidential amplification, transforming fantasy into a visual suggestion and releasing it into a polarized public already primed for anger. Images bypass skepticism faster than words ever could. A sentence can be questioned, debated, contextualized. A video imprints itself instantly. Even when viewers know it is fabricated, the brain registers the scenario before reason catches up. That is the danger. The video does not argue that Obama committed crimes. It shows him punished. The sequence skips process entirely. No investigation, no indictment, no trial, just the outcome. This is how political imagination is conditioned, not through persuasion, but through exposure. The United States has entered an era where deepfakes are no longer novelties or pranks. Intelligence agencies, universities, and election security officials have warned for years that synthetic media would be weaponized to erode trust. This case confirms the fear in its most extreme form. A sitting president circulating a manufactured arrest of a former president is not a lapse in judgment. It is a normalization exercise. It trains supporters to accept the visual language of political imprisonment as plausible, even desirable. The context makes the move even more combustible. Federal law enforcement agencies are already under pressure from competing narratives. Immigration enforcement actions have sparked nationwide protests. Fatal encounters involving federal agents are under scrutiny. Investigations related to election conduct continue to unfold. In this environment, showing a former president in custody reframes the entire conflict. It suggests that the solution to political disagreement is force, not law, and spectacle, not accountability. There is also a strategic elegance to the move. Artificial intelligence allows deniability without responsibility. Supporters can claim it is symbolic. Critics are accused of lacking humor. Meanwhile, the image circulates endlessly, detached from its origin, stripped of disclaimers, free to mutate across platforms. The message survives even if the creator is forgotten. This is propaganda without fingerprints. History offers chilling parallels. Authoritarian systems rarely begin with mass arrests. They begin with images. Enemies are portrayed as criminals long before charges exist. Public imagination is prepared so that when action comes, resistance feels futile or illegitimate. The video of Obama in chains follows that pattern with digital efficiency. It is not a prediction. It is a conditioning tool. The most unsettling detail is what did not happen afterward. There was no retraction, no clarification, no reaffirmation of legal norms. Silence functioned as endorsement. In modern politics, what a leader chooses not to correct becomes part of the message. The absence of restraint speaks louder than any caption. This is the moment when politics stops arguing and starts casting. The law becomes optional. Reality becomes flexible. Power experiments with imagery to see how far it can go. When fantasy goes visual, it does not stay harmless for long. It lingers, it spreads, and it teaches people to cheer before asking why. If timing is everything in politics, this outburst lands with surgical precision. As Minnesota becomes the epicenter of national outrage, the White House suddenly pivots to resurrecting ghosts from a decade ago. Immigration raids have ignited protests, federal agents have killed civilians, and videos circulate faster than official explanations. Streets are tense, trust is evaporating, and questions multiply by the hour. Instead of answers, the public gets accusations. Instead of accountability, it gets a spectacle aimed squarely at Barack Obama. This is not coincidence. It is choreography. The crisis in Minnesota is not abstract. It involves real bodies, real families, and federal officers operating under expanded authority. Immigration and customs enforcement actions have drawn fierce resistance, while the Department of Homeland Security struggles to justify aggressive tactics that appear designed to intimidate rather than enforce. Each day brings new footage contradicting official statements, and each contradiction deepens suspicion. This is the kind of moment when leadership demands clarity. Instead, the administration changes the subject with theatrical fury. At the same time, the federal government teeters on the edge of paralysis. Budget negotiations are collapsing. Agencies prepare for shutdown procedures, and workers brace for furloughs. A government that cannot fund itself is now asking the public to focus on a conspiracy theory involving former presidents, intelligence officials, foreign governments, and imaginary evidence. The logic is inverted. The louder the dysfunction, the louder the distraction. Noise becomes policy. Then there is Georgia. The Federal Bureau of Investigation executes lawful searches related to election records from 2020, a process grounded in warrants and judicial oversight. The response is instant outrage from the Oval Office. Investigations are rebranded as persecution. Legal scrutiny is framed as sabotage. Democracy, apparently, is only legitimate when it refuses to look backward. In this upside-down universe, enforcing the law becomes tyranny, while threatening political opponents becomes patriotism. This strategy is old, but the execution is modern. Create a villain large enough to swallow every headline. Accuse them of a crime vague enough to never require proof. Repeat until exhaustion sets in. By the time the audience realizes nothing has been resolved, attention has already moved on. The crisis fades. The outrage resets. The cycle continues. What matters is not resolution, but rotation. There is also a psychological comfort in blaming the past. Current failures feel less embarrassing when they can be attributed to inherited corruption. Policy chaos becomes someone else's fault. Violence becomes misdirection. Administrative breakdown becomes evidence of sabotage. Obama becomes a convenient lightning rod because he represents a different vision of power, restraint, and institutional respect. Attacking him is a way of attacking the idea that government can function without constant warfare. The irony is brutal. While the administration rails against imaginary coups, real confidence in governance collapses. While leaders tweet accusations, cities burn with anger and grief. While fantasies dominate feeds, facts wait patiently off stage. This is distraction by design, executed in real time, amid real suffering, with consequences that do not disappear when the next outrage arrives. The fire is real. The smoke is intentional. The contrast could not be sharper. On one side, a sitting president floods social media with accusations, fantasies, and demands for arrests. On the other, former presidents emerge cautiously, deliberately, and with language that sounds almost foreign in the current climate: restraint, warning, responsibility. The noise belongs to Donald Trump. The gravity belongs to everyone else. Bill Clinton, rarely eager to re-enter the daily political brawl, broke his silence with a message aimed not at enemies, but at history. He did not name Trump directly. He did not trade insults. Instead, he framed the moment as one of those rare crossroads when a nation decides whether its institutions still matter. His warning about losing freedoms built over 2.5 centuries landed precisely because it avoided spectacle. In an era addicted to outrage, understatement became the sharpest weapon. Joe Biden followed a similar path, focusing not on conspiracy but on consequence. His statement centered on Minnesota, on protesters, on citizens pushed to the brink by federal policy. He spoke of endurance, of dignity, of what it means to be American when authority forgets its limits. While Trump shouted about betrayal from the past, Biden spoke about pressure in the present. One voice demanded punishment. The other demanded reflection. Barack and Michelle Obama responded with the most detailed and disciplined message of all. Their statement addressed the violence directly, challenged official narratives, and pointed to video evidence contradicting government claims. They criticized tactics, not personalities. They questioned accountability, not loyalty. They warned that masked federal agents and aggressive operations erode trust and provoke danger. It was a response grounded in documentation, not imagination, and that distinction mattered. What made their intervention striking was its tone. There was no retaliation, no counter-accusation, no attempt to escalate. Instead, there was disappointment, concern, and a deliberate appeal to shared values. The Obamas did not ask for arrests. They asked for investigations. They did not demand obedience. They demanded standards. In a political environment that rewards volume, they chose precision. Trump's reaction to all of this was revealing. There was no substantive rebuttal, no engagement with the substance of the criticism, no explanation addressing the deaths, the raids, or the contradictions on video. There was only silence toward the arguments and renewed aggression toward the individual. The pattern repeats itself relentlessly. Ignore the issue, attack the person, escalate the rhetoric. This asymmetry exposes two radically different understandings of power. For Clinton, Biden, and Obama, the presidency is temporary, but the system is permanent. Words are chosen carefully because they echo beyond the moment. For Trump, the presidency is personal, and language is a weapon meant to dominate the cycle, not preserve the structure. Shouting replaces governing. Conflict replaces coherence. The result is a split-screen America. One side speaks in warnings about democratic erosion, civil liberties, and institutional decay. The other responds with memes, demands, and accusations untethered from legal reality. The former presidents are not trying to win a news cycle. They are trying to slow one down. And in doing so, they reveal just how far the current moment has drifted from anything resembling normal leadership. The silence is intentional. The shouts are strategic. The difference between them explains everything. The call to arrest a political rival is not a policy proposal. It is a signal. It announces a vision of power where elections are temporary inconveniences and institutions exist only when they obey. When Donald Trump publicly urges the prosecution and imprisonment of a former president without charges, trials, or evidence, he is not testing the law. He is testing the audience. He is asking how much erosion people will tolerate before it feels normal. This playbook is familiar to anyone who has watched democratic backsliding abroad. It never begins with tanks in the streets. It begins with rhetoric. Courts are labeled corrupt. Investigators are called traitors. Journalists become enemies. Political opponents are rebranded as criminals. Hungary, Turkey, Venezuela all followed this script with local variations but identical logic. Once opponents are framed as existential threats, extraordinary measures become acceptable. Arrests stop looking radical and start looking necessary. What makes the American version uniquely dangerous is the scale of the platform. Trump does not whisper these ideas in back rooms. He broadcasts them instantly to millions, bypassing mediators, institutions, and norms. A single post can redefine loyalty. A single accusation can delegitimize an agency. The presidency becomes less a constitutional office and more a megaphone for grievance. The louder the claim, the less room remains for facts. There is also a calculated ambiguity in the language. Trump does not file charges. He demands them. He does not prove crimes. He declares them obvious. This preserves flexibility. If nothing happens, supporters blame the system. If something happens, it confirms the narrative. Either outcome reinforces distrust. The goal is not conviction. The goal is corrosion. Meanwhile, real governance deteriorates. Immigration enforcement spirals into confrontation. Federal agencies face credibility crises. Budget deadlines collapse into chaos. None of this is accidental background noise. It is the environment in which authoritarian rhetoric thrives. Disorder creates appetite for control. Fear creates tolerance for excess. When people feel overwhelmed, they become easier to persuade that enemies must be eliminated rather than debated. The most corrosive effect is psychological. Citizens are trained to see politics as a zero-sum battlefield where losing equals annihilation. Compromise becomes betrayal. Process becomes weakness. Law becomes an obstacle. In that mindset, arresting opponents feels like justice rather than abuse. Democracy stops being a shared framework and becomes a prize to be seized. Trump insists he is defending democracy while hollowing out every guardrail that sustains it. He frames himself as the victim of persecution while encouraging the persecution of others. He claims to fight tyranny while rehearsing its techniques in public. The contradiction is not accidental. It is the core of the strategy. Accuse first, invert reality, exhaust resistance. The danger is not hypothetical, and it is not distant. Every time the call to arrest enemies goes unanswered, it moves closer to acceptance. Every time it is treated as entertainment, it gains legitimacy. History rarely announces its breaking point in advance. It reveals it only after norms have already collapsed. This is not about Barack Obama. It never was. It is about whether the presidency becomes a weapon wielded against rivals rather than a trust exercised on behalf of the public. The question facing America is brutally simple. Does power answer to law, or does law bend to power? The answer is being rehearsed in real time, one accusation at a time,